Okay, besties, hi. We are gonna sit and talk for so long today. I'm like trying to mentally prepare myself. I gotta keep it short and sweet, no rambling. We have a lot of books to get through. As you can tell by the title, today's video is going to be a cumulative wrap-up video. Now, last year, I really enjoyed making my monthly wrap-up videos, but this year I started doing a different format where I was including my monthly wrap-up in like a bookish monthly reset video. However, I quickly realized those videos are really time intensive for me to create. And if I have a lot going on at the turn of the month, it's hard for me to get those videos out. So for the past 3 months, I didn't do a bookish reset. And therefore you guys did not get to see my monthly wrap ups for April, May, or June. And I asked you guys in a poll on my community tab, which video you would rather see. And the spring reading wrap up was neck and neck with another video ranking every book I've read so far this year from worst to best. So after this video, if you guys would still want to see that, I definitely would be open to doing it. I'll also definitely do like a full tier ranking video at the end of the year, but just since we're kind of in the middle of the year, I thought some mid-year check-in kind of videos could be fun. If you still want to see any of those, let me know in the comments. I'm here to serve you. Also, we're gonna try having the microphone clipped onto my shirt today. I know usually I hold a microphone, but I'm just curious to kind of try out some different audio methods. I use my hands a lot when I'm talking, and then also when I'm like holding up books and stuff, it's just nice to be hands-free. So we're trying this out. Let me know if you like it more or less than holding the microphone. And the last bit of housekeeping I have is that a lot of the books that I'm going to be talking about in today's video, I did read in reading vlogs. As I talk about them, I'm going to be referencing the videos where you can find my full in-depth thoughts. And in this video, I'm going to try to dive a little bit deeper into any of the books that I didn't read in reading vlogs already. I'm not going to make you go watch the other videos to get my general thoughts, but like I said, if you're curious about a deep dive, I'll point you in the right direction. I think that's all my housekeeping. I've got my water with me. I'm just like locking in because it's going to be a lot of talking that we have to do today. I'm going to timestamp it out below, so feel free to skip around, do you, have fun. The first book that I read in the month of April was That's Not My Name by Lally. This is a YA mystery thriller. I actually ended up listening to this one on audiobook. I found it for free through my library on the Hoopla app, and I'd heard really good things about this mystery thriller, and I was just trying to kind of like avoid a slump and listen to something that was going to keep me interested, and this definitely helped with that, and this definitely had me hooked. It's dual POV, and the narration has 2 different narrators, one for the boy and one for the girl. I can't remember their names, but the general plot here is that this girl wakes up like abandoned in a ditch. She doesn't remember anything about how she got there. She doesn't even know her name, hence That's Not My Name. And this older man comes and gets her, claims that he's her father. He has all her paperwork and everything, and he takes her home. So that's the girl's POV. You're following her. And then the other POV is this guy, and his girlfriend went missing a couple weeks ago, and a lot of people think he had something to do with it. For one, he wants to clear his name, but for 2, he really wants to find his girlfriend. So those are the 2 POVs you're following. By the end of the story, they do end up intertwining in some way, and you're just kind of on the fast track to figure out like how they're connected. I found this one really engaging for the first bit, but I will say, mild spoiler, I have definitely realized this year that kidnapping thrillers are just not for me. I think as young women, we all live in fear of that happening to us or a friend, and that is just too much of a real like fear, honestly, for me and for my loved ones, that reading about it in a thriller, it just like makes me sick to my stomach. I also read Then She Was Gone earlier this year, and I felt the same way. So I will just kind of give that warning that there is like kidnapping involved in this book. And this spring, I think I've definitely started to realize more what my taste in thrillers is and also what it is not. And this one just wasn't my favorite for that reason. It ended up just putting me in kind of a weird headspace. So I ended up giving it, I think like maybe a 3-star. Okay, next book that I read in April, actually another mystery thriller on audiobook, but this one I actually ended up listening to on a road trip with my friend Lizzie. This is a great like crowd pleaser audiobook, and this is exactly my taste in mystery thrillers. I really enjoyed this one. Did I even say what the book was? It's The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This one is more of an adult mystery thriller, I would say, and it has like 6 main characters. I'm pretty sure that you switch POVs between each chapter, and on the audiobook, all of them had their own narrator. So it was a full cast, which was chef's kiss. So good. I've heard some people say that they felt like The Guest List was kind of boring or that it dragged. I feel like if you listen to the audiobook, you will be hooked. It was so engaging to have all the different voices. The premise of this one is that you were on like this remote, I want to say it's an Irish island where this really expensive wedding is happening, and there's a murder that takes place, and you're kind of trying to figure out like who got murdered. There's multiple timelines, and it's just a fun time. It had me guessing until the very end. Honestly, I was definitely shocked by the twist, and I will say I feel like the first third was a little bit slow, the second third, it picked up a bit, and then by the last third, I was locked in. So it just got exponentially more interesting, which a lot of times is just how it goes with thrillers. But overall, I had fun with this one, and I would read another book from Lucy Foley. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was just a solid mystery thriller. Let me know why I didn't grab the guest list to hold up as a prop while I was talking about it. I totally forgot. Yeah, you don't need to get the copy, listen to the audiobook. Okay, also around this time, I can't quite remember when I officially DNF'd the Atlas 6, but I wanted to call out that I did DNF that one. I was trying to listen to this one on audiobook, and it has a full cast narration, which I was super excited about, and it was on my Hoopla app, but this one was just kind of hard to follow, honestly, and I just didn't want to pick it back up, and I don't know, I wasn't into it, I wasn't hooked. Around this time, a bunch of new releases were coming out too, and I just wanted to like move on and get to read some of those and not force myself to read the Atlas 6 when I wasn't feeling it. I definitely want to come back to Olivie Blake at some point soon and read a different book from her. That one just wasn't hitting for me, so I put it down. The next 3 books I'm going to talk about were all included in my new release mania vlog, so I'll link that down below for a deep dive. But the next book I read in April was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This is a book that I had set my expectations way too high for. This one just really let me down, guys. Probably the biggest like flop of the year for me so far. And I know that this is a really polarizing book. Like you either love this or you hate it. And I was just shocked by how much I really did not like this book. I literally just flipped open a page and it says, "He had imprinted on me" at the top. Like just the amount of slang, like that is a Twilight reference. And I just felt like the amount of like millennial slang in here, I don't know, it usually doesn't bother me so much, but for some reason it just like really was grinding my gears in this book. This book in general just really like irked me, and I have no idea why I got so angry over this. The writing in this book just did not feel at all like the writing I've come to know and love from Abby Jimenez and her other books. I just could not find that connection that I usually find in Abby Jimenez books. I absolutely love the Part of Your World trilogy. I think this is starting like a new interconnected series. I just don't know if I'm going to continue on with this series. I think some of the main criticisms of this book that I would largely agree with is that it's very insta love, like they fall in love right away, and then the whole book is just kind of like depressing because they're just trying to like figure out how to do life with like all of these obstacles. It's a very real part of life, of course, but if it's going to follow that, I almost would rather it be like a literary fiction book in that way, and it's still very much read like a romance, so it just felt very like disjointed to me in that way. I know a lot of people love it, so I don't really want to sit here and dog on it. For me personally, it was like really tough to get through. I almost DNF'd it. Sadly, a really big disappointment for me, but if you ended up loving it, I'm so happy for you, and honestly, I'm jealous. Okay, after I finished Say You'll Remember Me, I was like, I need something to cheer me up. I need something that I know is a guaranteed 5-star, lock it in. And so what I decided to do was my first reread of the year. I have a hard time convincing myself to reread books because there's so many on my TBR, but I want to get more comfortable throwing some rereads into the mix throughout the year, and this was a great start because it really reminded me how much fun rereading can be, and that was Every Summer After by Carley Fortune. This is Carley Fortune's debut novel that she released, I want to say it was 2022. Yes, 2022. And this summer, as I'm sure most of you know, she released One Golden Summer, which is kind of a companion novel to Every Summer After. Carley Fortune's writing is just some of my favorite. It really transports you, and you just like, you can smell the salt air, you can feel your hair like rippling in the wind on the boat, and that's what I love so much about them. They're very nostalgic. Every Summer After was a book that I read as I was getting back into reading, and I read it in like a day or two. I just devoured this, and I just thought it would be really fun to reread this before reading Charlie's story. So this follows the older brother from the first book, and this was incredible. I was able to read an arc of this before it came out, and this has definitely been my favorite romance book that I've read so far this year. It was so good. It's so atmospheric, so flirty. Like Charlie in this book, I think he's my new favorite book boyfriend of definitely of the whole year. Carley Fortune knows what she's doing, and both of these books were 5 stars for me, of course, so I just really needed this, and this just like picked me up. It gave me a forehead kiss, and it told me everything was going to be okay. And it also just helped me get so excited for summer. Reading this in April when the weather was starting to warm up, I was just like so ready for the summer vibes, and this really got me ready. So if you haven't read either of these, please read them. They are some of my favorite romance books. You don't have to read Every Summer After before One Golden Summer, but I would recommend it. They are the perfect books to take to the beach, the pool, the lake this summer. So if you need a good one, this is what I recommend. Okay, and then the last 2 books that I read in the month of April were both included in my Kobo reading vlog, so I will link that down below for a deep dive on these. But the next book that I read was Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. Honestly, it's a tough follow-up. You know, anything that's gonna be coming after One Golden Summer, it's just not gonna measure up. So I ended up giving this one a 4-star. This is a contemporary romance book by Cara Bastone. I read Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone earlier this year and absolutely loved it. That is probably my second place contemporary romance of the year. It was like a 4.5, maybe a 5-star upon reflection, like definitely top tier this year. So I was really, really excited to read Ready or Not because I love Promise Me Sunshine so much. And this one was good. It was even maybe great, but it wasn't necessarily a new favorite. This one has Cara Bastone's signature kind of like quirky characters and like journal style train of thought writing that I really loved from Promise Me Sunshine. The plot in this one just wasn't necessarily my favorite. And honestly, I just didn't connect with Eve, our female main character in this book, as much as I did with Lenny in Promise Me Sunshine. But if you didn't know, this is a surprise pregnancy trope. I mean, it's called Ready or Not, and it's like the headline on the back of the book. So I do think you should know what you're getting into if you're gonna read this. The book is literally separated out by trimester. It's a little bit more of like a women's fiction, which I usually like, but the surprise pregnancy in this book, I just was constantly comparing it to Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. This one I read back in November and I gave it 5 stars. I loved Out on a Limb. This to me was just like the ultimate surprise pregnancy book, and I was just, yeah, constantly comparing this one, and it just wasn't as good as this one in my opinion. So that also like docked it just slightly. But overall, I still really liked this book. Love Cara Bastone and will definitely read more from her. And the very last book I read in April was Shark Heart by Emily Habeck. This one's actually on Kindle Unlimited, so if you want to read this one, you should go get it while it's on there. But this is a very unique, more like literary fiction story. It does say a love story on here, and I will agree it's a love story, but it's definitely not a romance. This book is set in like, I want to say it's like 2019 Texas. Everything about the world they live in is exactly like our world now, except for it's normal and it's accepted that humans can mutate into basically any other animal, and it's kind of just like a medical diagnosis that can happen. It can run in families and it can just pop up all of a sudden. So you're following a married couple, Ren and Lewis, who just got married, and Lewis starts having some weird symptoms. So he goes to the doctor and they tell him that he is mutating into a great white shark. This specific metamorphosis is one of the most challenging ones because obviously he's not going to be a mammal anymore, and you're just following Lewis and Ren as they grapple with this diagnosis. I felt like the concept of this book was really interesting because the diagnosis is kind of able to stand in for any kind of sickness without us having like a personal connection to a specific illness like cancer or Alzheimer's. It really is just more so exploring the psychology, the heartbreak, just the different sociological and like anthropological pieces of this couple dealing with this change and kind of going through the 5 stages of grief, honestly. The first half of the book is kind of following Lewis through his transition, and then the second half of the book, you're kind of following more of like Ren's backstory and some stuff that she experienced in her childhood. So that pacing felt a little weird to me, but ultimately I understand why the author did it. The book is also just like formatted in a really unique way. There are different kinds of chapters and pages where like there will be something written like a scene. It's just written in a really unique and unconventional way that I really enjoyed. It just was so original, but it also was kind of wacky. And there was just something about it that kept me from fully like letting the characters into my heart, I guess. Like I kind of had some boundaries up with them because there was just like a lot going on in this book and I was like trying to process, I guess. That's how I felt about Shark Heart. It was really great. I would recommend it, but I wasn't like sobbing over it. Okay, those are all the books I read in April. Now let's move on to May. The first 2 books I'm going to talk about were both featured in my work trip reading vlog, so check that out if you want a deep dive on either of these. But the first book that I read in the month of May was Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I ended up reading this one on my Kobo, so I don't have a physical copy. This is a YA, like Regency era romantasy, and it's following a main character who was cursed by a fairy who took half her soul. So how this shows up for our main character, Dora, is that she can just have a harder time connecting with people in a really like natural, organic way. She can be a little bit aloof to like what's going on in the room or not understand someone's humor. Oh, and the whole plot is that because it's like in a Regency setting, she is going through like debut or whatever, trying to find a husband, like Bridgerton kind of stuff. So she and her cousin are both like coming out into society and looking for husbands. And obviously with Dora only having half a soul, it can cause her to be prone to scandal, which is not good when you're trying to find a husband. And I think my biggest hang up with this book is just like, I didn't know where the story was going for a while. And then once I kind of had a sense of that, I just like, I don't know, I didn't care. I found the idea of this book to be a lot more interesting than the actual execution, which I feel really bad saying. I think I just thought it was gonna be a little more plot driven, and I found the plot kind of took a different turn than what I expected. I think if you like the cozy fantasy genre, you could really like this. I just find it can be a little hit or miss for me. So I gave this one 3 stars. It was good, I liked it, but I don't know that I'd continue the series. Okay, the next book that I read in the month of May was Fearless by Lauren Roberts. This is the 3rd and final book in the Powerless trilogy, so I was really excited because this one came out in April title and I was just dying to get to it. I put it on my May TBR and I was like, we're getting to this right away. But where to start with this? I think for me with this, nothing is gonna ever live up to the original Powerless book. That one I read it at the perfect time. It was just what I needed. I did really love Powerful, the novella. I've got like all my books here. So Powerless, she's just that girl. She's just iconic, like mic drop. Like I just had so much fun with this. I also hadn't read that much romantasy yet, and it was just a great intro to the genre. And I had so much fun. Powerful is a short novella that follows book 1, and it gives you a POV from book 1 that you didn't get. So you just get this like other miniature lens into that book, and I loved this. This was so well done. Definitely recommend. Absolutely love her. And it's just really hard to follow these two, ultimately. I read Reckless last July when it came out, and I enjoyed it. It felt a little bit like a bridge book. It's a lot shorter than the other two. I had fun. Looking back, I feel like I liked it more than I thought I did at the time. And then rounding it out with Fearless, this one just had like a lot of plot to get through. This was a long book. I think if it had been just a little bit shorter, I probably would have liked it a little bit more. Ultimately, it felt like the end of the series, like it did what it needed to do. We needed to close out some loopholes. I found it pretty compelling for the first half, but then I just started feeling the length of the book towards the second half, which I just hate when I feel that way ever. So I just have mixed feelings. Like it's not a new favorite, but I also was satisfied with it. So I gave it a 3.75. Overall, the whole trilogy is a lot of fun, and it's a great place to start if you need an intro to the romantasy genre, but it's not one that I've really thought about much since finishing it. The next two books that I read in May, I read in my Getting Out of a Rut vlog. So that's Great Big Beautiful Life and The Love Haters. So if you want deep dives on either of those, it's in that vlog. The next book I read in May was Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, and I've been hearing a lot of mixed reviews about it, which I was a little bit hesitant going in, but I was definitely relieved as I got started with this book, and I was just comforted in this like hug by Emily Henry's writing. I love her writing. It just flows into my brain perfectly. Plot-wise, this book wasn't my favorite from her. You're following Alice and Hayden. They're competing to tell the story of Margaret Ives, this reclusive heiress. It's kind of giving The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo a little bit, but the execution was done totally differently. And ultimately, you really are following Alice and Hayden. And this is a story about them more than it is about Margaret Ives, in my opinion. I definitely felt the romance between them and really enjoyed it. And I did just really like both of our main characters. I definitely was surprised by the kind of twist we get at the end. And I found some of Margaret's chapters, like, I never was bored, but I was just kind of like, why are we hearing this? Like, is this going to be important later on? And then a lot of it wasn't. And so that was a little bit like unsatisfying as a reader, where I wasn't annoyed that I was getting backstory. I was like, okay, T, like, tell me what happened with your grandparents. But like, it didn't really end up mattering to Margaret's story, like all of the backstory that we got. So for that reason, just like the whole story to me just wasn't like the most sharply executed, I guess. So even though I really enjoyed the writing, just wasn't my favorite plot. I gave it a 4-star. It's like bottom tier Emily Henry for me, unfortunately, but bottom tier Emily Henry is still like top tier compared to a lot of books that I read. Okay, the next book I read in the month of May was The Love Haters by Katherine Center. I ended up reading this one on my Kindle because I had an e-arc of it from NetGalley, and I have very mixed feelings about this one. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars because while I had a lot of fun actually reading it, the content of the book was somewhat questionable. This book basically follows Katie, who is a young woman in her, I think 30s-ish, who lives in Texas, and she works for this video production company. So for work, she gets sent to the Florida Keys to work on this promo video for the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard has hired her company to do this promo, and she's gonna be profiling this one Coast Guard rescue swimmer who is like kind of famous, but this guy just does not want to cooperate. Like, he doesn't want to be in the video, and so Katie's trying to convince him to help her out and be in the video because she's worried about losing her job and she needs to do a really good job with the video. And that's kind of the setup. This one was just like so wacky. I will give a huge trigger warning on this book for like body image issues, eating disorders, body dysmorphia. If you struggle with any of that, I would be very cautious about reading this book. I think it was not handled in a great way. A lot of it is very toxic, and if you're not in a good headspace with that, avoid this book. For me, it wasn't a deal breaker, but it also kept me from really like fully emotionally connecting with Katie because I was definitely frustrated with her and like how she spoke about herself in her own head. And she definitely goes on like a self-love journey throughout the book. It's very like women's fiction. You're just getting Katie's POV throughout the book. So if you like women's fiction, if you like Katherine Center, it definitely reads tonally like her other books. But also, wait, the ending I didn't even talk about was so wacky. It like devolved into like telenovela status. It was just like so unbelievably like silly at the end, in my opinion. So yeah, this book was just like silly. It was unserious, but at the same time was trying to deal with serious topics. It was kind of a hot mess, but I had fun reading it. So that's why I am at a crossroads with like how to rate it or think about it. So those are my feelings. The next book that I read in the month of May was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. I actually had the audiobook for this one come up on my Libby, and I've been meaning to read this one for forever, and I thought the audiobook could be a really great way to read it because I'd kind of been putting it off. I picked this one up back in, I want to say 2021, and I read like the first 50 pages and then I just didn't really get into it. It was one of the first books I picked up when I was trying to get back into reading, and it just didn't like hook me. So I ended up reading some other stuff and never finished this one, but I did enjoy it when I started it. So I knew I wanted to come back to it at some point, and I finally did. And I would recommend the audiobook. I felt like it was a great way to read this book. Throughout this book, you're following the main female character, Amira Tucker, who I want to say she's like 25, and she's a young Black woman who is a babysitter for this annoying white woman. The woman's name is Alex, but she likes for it to be pronounced Alix because she's insufferable. And you're just kind of following Amira. It's very slice of life. You're following her as she just kind of deals with all of these insufferable white people. This book just really tackles race, class, privilege in a way that's really, really important. Where I struggle with my rating on this book is that while I think it tackles really, really important topics and I respect what it's trying to do, it wasn't a book I was like hooked to and couldn't put down. And I just felt guilty that I wasn't staying engaged with the story itself. It's very character driven. It is not plot driven at all. Like I said, it's very slice of life. And with many of those books, no matter what kind of themes it's dealing with, sometimes they're just slower to get through. So I think for that reason, it kind of pulled down my rating of this one a bit. So while I felt like it was helping me build my brain, I didn't feel especially connected to Amira or any of the other insufferable people that she was dealing with in this book. I am definitely glad I read it though, and I think it's worth picking up just for the conversation that it sparks. Next up in May, I read Broken Country by Clare Leslie Hall. This one was on my May TBR, so I was excited to get to this one. This one kind of reminds me of Where the Crawdads Sing, but if it were set in the English countryside. In this story, you've got Beth, and she has this kind, gentle, just like perfect husband, Frank, and he's just like the most empathetic, understanding guy. Like he's great. Beth and Frank live in the English countryside on this farm. It's where they grew up, and they've got their whole lives set up there. And the story kind of kicks off with Beth's ex-situationship from high school and college, kind of, coming back to live in the town with them. T, right? Like, oh my God. And Beth's ex-situationship, Gabriel, has also a son named Leo, and Beth actually lost her son a couple years back, and she's still really, really mourning and grieving him. So spending time with Leo is kind of helping to fill that hole in her heart just a little bit. So she ends up spending a little bit more time with Gabriel, and you've kind of got this like love triangle going on. All the while, we also have like a murder mystery going on in this story. So at the very beginning of the story, you know someone dies, you don't know who, and you're getting these like multiple timelines throughout the book, and you're kind of just piecing it together as you go along. So you've got tension, you've got drama, you've got murder, you've got the English countryside. It just was a delight. It was very fast paced, easy to read. I was frustrated with Beth at times. It was one of those books where you're like, Beth, what are we doing? But also, okay, like sure, whatever. So it was frustrating at times, but ultimately a really intriguing story. I didn't feel any like super strong feelings about this book, which is why it's like in the 4.5 range for me, but I devoured it. It was great. The setting, the plot, the writing, so good. I just like haven't really thought about it that much since, I'm not gonna lie, but loved it when I was reading it. Alrighty, and the last two books that I read in the month of May were both covered in my book swap reading vlog with bestie Katie. Katie sent me 2 books to read, and I read them in that vlog, and these are the last 2 books that I read in the month of May. The first one was Katie's 5-star read, which is On a Quiet Street by Seraphina Nova Glass, another mystery thriller I read this spring that is more of a domestic drama. Again, I'm really learning that this is my cup of tea when it comes to a thriller. Same with Broken Country, more of a domestic drama, a whodunit kind of vibe. It's great. It's suspenseful without being like super scary. And that's overall like my review on this book. It was suspenseful without being super scary. It was a 4-star for me, just a very solid mystery thriller. The plot of this one is kind of layered to like sit here and explain to you, but you've got 6 different main characters. There are 3 different couples who like all live in this neighborhood, and there's just a lot of drama in this book. I found it to be very like slice of life in the first half, very character based, which I feel like it can be kind of hard to find a character driven thriller. And I feel like this one, while it is plot driven, you really get to connect with the characters, and they really do have like character arcs throughout the novel, which like I said, I feel like it's kind of hard to find. So it was very like Housewives in the beginning, but by the end it was like, okay, I love them. So yeah, overall, this was really fun to read. It's on Kindle Unlimited. If you need a good little palate cleanser, might I suggest On a Quiet Street. And the last book that I read in the month of May was Heavenly Bodies by Imani Erriu. This is an adult romantasy book, and it was so good. It's book 1 in a new series called the Heavenly Bodies series, I guess. Book 2 is coming out in November. These were originally, I think it's a trilogy. They were originally indie published, but now they've been picked up by Random House Canada. I loved this. I had a blast. This is probably my favorite book I read in the month of May. It just was so original. It was such an imaginative concept. It's set in this fantasy world where instead of gods, they have stars. And I think there's 13 stars and they all represent one of the zodiac signs. The reason there's 13 is that there's 2 for Gemini since they're the twins, but there's basically like a star, aka a god, for each sign. And that star is like the god or the goddess of some of the like kind of quintessential traits of that zodiac sign. And on top of that, the world that they live in, the continent is split up into like 12 different territories. And those are all like ruled by one of the stars. So it's just very celestial and I love astrology and I just had so much fun with that concept and it was such a blast. On top of that, we have some of the best slow burn tension and banter from a romantasy that I've read in a while. You've got Alara and Enzo. Alara is kind of like this princess of the Night Kingdom. It's Pycea, which is the Pisces one. She gets captured and taken into Helion, which is like the Leo kingdom. So our main male character Enzo has like Leo qualities and traits, and he's kind of like the prince of the sun, and she's kind of like the princess of the moon. And so they're kind of like opposites attract, and they have these powers. And basically Enzo's trying to train Alara so that she can kind of like be a weapon for their kingdom. And it's this like enemies to lovers plot. It's just trust me, it's so good. If you haven't read it and you like the genre, give it a try. I loved it. And those are all the books I read in the month of May. Last but not least, let's talk about my June reads. This one's gonna be shorter probably than the other sections because honestly, I read the least in June that I think I've read in any month of the whole year. As many of you know, I took a vacation to London and Paris for like 10 days in the month of June. So that just kept me super busy. And honestly, I just didn't read much during that trip. And then on top of that, in the month of June, I was clocking in to watch Love Island USA every night. So that definitely took away from reading time as well. Because even after the episode's over, I was going on TikTok to like watch edits. I was going on Threads to see what people were saying about the episode, and then I was just on my phone, for the rest of the night. So my reading goals got a little derailed in June, and that's okay. I'm having grace with myself. So I kind of feel like I should just say that I read 4 books in the month of June, but if we're counting the mindf series as 5 little novellas, I guess you could say I read 8 books in the month of June. I'm probably gonna say 8 in my reading journal just to make myself feel better about myself, but let's talk about them. First up, I read Passion Project by London Sperry. This was a delight. Honestly, what a treat. This is not a lighthearted romance book though, I will say. There are a lot of deeper emotional themes in this book. Very similar, honestly, to Promise Me Sunshine. Between the two, I still like Promise Me Sunshine a bit more, but this was so well done. This is a debut novel, debut author, and I definitely want to read more from London Sperry in the future because this was phenomenal. The writing to me, if you gave me this manuscript blind and told me to guess the author, I might guess Emily Henry. The writing was stellar. This is really a story about grief and healing, so go into it knowing that, because I definitely thought it was a little more lighthearted and fun and rom-com-y. And while there are elements of that, the heart of the story is really about grief. The main thing that kept me from giving this a 5-star is just that I didn't always love Bennett as a main character. She frustrated me a ton, but in a way that felt very human. I couldn't really fault her for it. When you meet Bennett in this story, she's hurting, she feels stuck, and she definitely pushes people away. And I just sometimes get so frustrated in, especially contemporary romance books, when people are pushing love out of their life. And I understand why they do it. It just, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, just accept the love. She just could be really hard to root for at times, but I did really understand her too. Again, it's just what are you gonna do? I do wish therapy had kind of come into the conversation, come into the picture sooner for Bennett. I think it would have been really interesting to even just have some short chapters interspersed throughout the book of her talking with her therapist about things, or I don't know, something like that. I just think it'd be nice to bring it into the conversation sooner, because a lot of times I just can see the writing on the wall with these stories of how the main character is gonna self-destruct towards the end, and then we're gonna have to try to put the pieces back together. And then because growth is not linear, healing is not linear, if we could kind of have a little bit of hope from a therapy session and then have another breakdown, I just think it would be a more authentic comfort read too. I also will say I know that therapy can be a really simple solution for really complex problems, and it's not the one and only magic solution to everything, just put therapy band-aid on there and it's all good. Of course not. But I go to therapy, and I think as someone who goes to therapy, I just couldn't help but want to drag this girl into therapy as soon as I met her. I was like, girl, we need an emergency session, because she was not okay. And also, I know therapy isn't accessible to everyone. Bennett is really struggling financially throughout the book, so it did make sense that that wasn't necessarily an option for her for a while. So I will acknowledge that. And then Henry in this book, he was perfect. Maybe even too perfect. Oh, loved him. I also really enjoyed the side characters in this book. I really enjoyed the setting in this book. I felt like the pacing was really good. It was just like Bennett self-destructing at times. I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, not this again. But like I said, it was very human. I understood where she was coming from. So overall, I love this book. I had a great time. Would definitely read more from this author. Would definitely recommend it. It kind of feels like a cross between Emily Henry and Cara Bastone. So if you love either of them, you might love this. Okay, then I read the mindf series by S.T. Abbey. I know this is a cult favorite for a lot of people. I read this while I was traveling in London and Paris. So I read all 5 of the little novellas. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. And I would say like book 1 was like a 4-star. And then by the time we got to book 5, it was all the way down to 3 stars. And I just was kind of thinking to myself, like, when you look at the book all bound together, it's like over 600 pages. And have you ever read a 600-page thriller? Because it got boring for me. It got repetitive, and I liked the dark romance like aspects of this. It just was like so long. And I think this would have been really great if it was like a 300 or 400 page just like novel. I just didn't need the like 5 novellas. And even though, hey, I got my reading goals up for the month, I still technically read 8 books instead of 4. You're following this serial killer main female character who ends up in a bit of a romance with like her FBI agent, the one who's like on her case. And that's really all you need to know going into it. The premise, such a fun idea. I was flipping the pages in the beginning and then I just was losing interest. The writing didn't really stand out to me. So I think if you're gonna read this, I would maybe recommend try reading each novella between other books. Just definitely have some things in between each of them to kind of space it out. And then that way, by the time you get back to it, maybe you'll be wanting more. I just think trying to binge read it all together was not the move for me. Those are my thoughts on this one. And the last 2 books that I read in the month of June were both featured in my recent vlog. This video ends when I find a 5-star read. Spoiler alert, you're gonna hear about the 5-star read in this video. But if you want a deep dive into my thoughts and reading experience, they're both in that video. So I read It's a Love Story by Annabel Monaghan in June. I was dying to get to this new release, and ultimately I was a little disappointed by this one. It's definitely not a new favorite from Annabel Monaghan, but I did have a good time reading it. The writing definitely met my expectations. It had all of Annabel Monaghan's signature like wit and charm and humor, and I just really love the way she writes. So this book got a lot of points from me on that. Again, this is more of like an adult contemporary romance, but it leans women's fiction. You're just getting the main POV of our female main character, Jane, throughout this book. Jane has a lot of layers and internal conflict, and kind of like in Passion Project, she just annoyed me at times in a way that like I didn't connect with, but I did understand from like a human level. I definitely could see the vision for her arc, but I just never fully connected with her, and she just didn't quite come to life for me. I did feel like Jane's character definitely took inspiration from Jeanette McCurdy in I'm Glad My Mom Died, and so if you liked that memoir, you could find this book interesting. I really loved that memoir, and then I still got a little frustrated with this book, so not to say you're definitely gonna love it if you loved that book, but there are some similarities. Jane is a former child star. She was on a really popular sitcom, and she was kind of the like comic relief character on the sitcom, and so now as an adult, Jane is trying to kind of unlearn all of these projections that she's put on herself from the industry, from her family, and just like kind of learn to love herself for who she is. All the while there's this like other plot going on, but that's kind of like the premise with Jane. I feel like with her, again, just the emotional growth and development needed a little more weight. Would have loved for therapy to have been brought into the conversation. Jane did have the means to be going to therapy. So in Passion Project, by the end, our main character was going to therapy. It wasn't even really like addressed in this book, and I felt like Jane could have benefited from talking to a professional, and I as a reader would have loved to see that. The love interest in this book was fine. Like, he just wasn't anything special or memorable to me. You know, after Passion Project and Heavenly Bodies and One Golden Summer, like, the bar was just set really high, and like, he was just kind of blah. I don't know. I appreciated the message at the heart of the story, which is kind of what I was talking about before, how the narratives that we tell ourselves kind of shape how we end up loving ourselves throughout our lives, and how we always have the power to kind of take control of those narratives, which I think that was a really strong idea for kind of a premise here. And this book definitely had great writing, good humor, a really immersive atmosphere. It's set in Long Island, and it's just a great beachy read. But ultimately, like, the execution of the plot was a little wonky to me, and I just didn't really connect with the characters too much. So this one met expectations. It was fun, it was cute, but it's not a new favorite. I gave it a 3.75. And the final book I read in the month of June, My Shayla, Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A moment of silence. This was so good. You have to go watch my This Video Ends When I Find a 5-Star Read reading vlog. Spoiler alert, this was the 5-star, and then the video ended. This was just spectacular. You guys definitely should read this. I think anyone would like this. It's from the same author as Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I just really adore this author. I've loved everything that I've read from her, and I was so excited that she had a new release this year because she hasn't come out with a book in like, I want to say 2 or 3 years, so I knew it was gonna be good, and it just exceeded my expectations. It was spectacular. I listened to the audiobook for a good chunk of this book, and then I also did some physical reading for like the last 100 pages. I also would say if you can, maybe download the sample on Kindle and read the first like 15, 20 pages physically, because there's kind of a lot going on and you kind of got to get oriented. But once you get through those, it's really easy to go and just listen to the audiobook after that. The audiobook was so good too. Like either way, you can't go wrong. I wouldn't say one is maybe better than the other. I felt like they were just even, like both were great experiences. The concept of this book is basically that you're following Joan, who is in a 1980s NASA space shuttle program, and she's on the ground in Houston. She is Capcom, so she's talking to some of her team who's on a space mission, and things are going horribly wrong on the space shuttle. And so Joan is kind of that like voice of comfort for everyone on the shuttle, and she has to like stay really strong and like keep herself together. But little does anyone really know that there is someone on that space shuttle who she's desperately in love with. And that's kind of all you need to know as you get into this story. You have dual timeline between Joan on the Capcom with the shuttle, and then kind of the backstory of like how we got there. So Joan getting into the program and training and all of that. So you're going back and forth. It's high stakes, it's tension, it's emotional, it's beautiful. And this is probably maybe my favorite book I've read so far this year. I absolutely loved it, and you guys have to read it. So that is the final book for this video. I've been talking for so long. If you made it this far in the video, honestly, bestie status unlocked. I really appreciate any of you who listen to me just talk for that long about books, but I had so much fun, and it's always just a blast sitting here and chatting books with you guys. If you want me to start doing more like monthly wrap-up videos again, or if you liked this like kind of quarterly format where maybe every 3 months or so I just do like a big yap sesh about all the books I've been reading, let me know what you kind of prefer. I don't know how realistic it is that I can do a reset vlog every single month, but if you guys preferred that format, I definitely would want to know. Or if you just prefer to see monthly recaps in like a YouTube short, let me know. I'm open to all kinds of ideas, but I definitely want to hear from you. Yeah, I think that's gonna be it for today's video. If you made it this far, comment down below with the lime emoji so I can know who made it to the end. I just want to say thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you super soon in another video. Bye everyone!